The council have filed an application that I believe they don't actually understand. I'm of the belief that the only reason they filed it is so that council can utter the phrase, "We can't talk about this, it's before the courts." The whole idea of something that they've prepared months in advance of warning everyone they're going to do it puts a spin on it that they now are realising that if somebody does a proper discovery notice, that everything they've been making very difficult to get is suddenly going to have to become available. And if they don't keep that in the court for as long as possible, that means that will then become court record, and court record is public knowledge. And then it'll all get released, by which time, all things being equal, it'll be about election time. And like with, I think the new CEO is Marty, you look up when, and this is something I mentioned the other day, when the council had a go at Bella Vista, prior to that, it was all going on in the background, most people didn't know it was happening, that council had made on their own website an acknowledgement that Gary Poole, the CEO of council, was about to come up for his contractual renewal, and he had so many years signed in by default that he would just automatically get. They could just roll it over, no questions asked, unless they wanted to extend the period, at which time they would then have to extend notice in public to advertise the job. The mayor stated that the only reason they were advertising it was to meet the obligation so that they could roll him over into a longer term contract. And then he didn't get the job. And we're looking at the scenario and saying, well, he didn't get the job, what changed? You were so keen on having this guy stay, or was this when all the problems started getting highlighted? Was this when the guys from Bella Vista actually started making enough noise that people realised the massive amount of failings on council's part, that it was going to be very difficult for the council to justify keeping him on board? And it looks like, from an outside perspective, it could be considered that he was thrown under the bus as the problem and exit. What they've not stated in public is that, yes, the council issued proceedings, but the council didn't sign the proceedings. The council is the prosecutor, because the criminal proceeding under that section of the Act, the council has a discretionary power, not a mandatory obligation, but discretionary. And that's very important for later on, that they can be the prosecutor. I would like to suggest to anyone watching that, have a guess whose name is the prosecutor's name. But he does not have an axe to grind with the companies that he's prosecuting. They may be considered, if you look at the whole scheme of things, to be the two companies that cost him his job, but then filing a proceeding with his name signed to the documents kind of looks a little bit off par, maybe. I won't say what I think it is. Then I want to know the process on how they got to that determination. So the Bella Vista Homes people end up becoming the pawn. They had a whole lot of houses finished once Bella Vista went into liquidation, based on, from everything I've read, that, and I've got access to stuff other than what's printed in the media by some reporters that perhaps don't know what the word balanced means unless they work for a fertiliser company, and because that seems to be a lot of what they're piling. They have gone and put a target on an individual without actually doing their homework on what parts of that project he finished or why he couldn't finish them. They targeted issues on individual inspections without realising necessarily that their own inspectors had signed them off. And you're saying, well, I could take you to hundreds of houses in Tauranga that have no codes of compliance, hundreds, because codes of compliance wasn't a new thing invented back, I think, 90s. Prior to that, every house in council wouldn't have one in the district. So Tauranga City Council isn't attacking those people saying, hey, your house isn't up to code. Well, the code didn't exist then. So if a house, from a code of compliance perspective, is missing, I can give examples of people that have had this. I've also got examples of architects, builders, other engineers than the ones I'm associated with, and plumbers that can give you plain examples of how a code of compliance got failed. And in my particular case, I had one that was failed on a second story dispersion pipe. A second story dispersion pipe, for people that don't know what that is, it collects water off a top roof and it filters that water onto a second roof below it, and then it goes down to your guttering. It failed. I got a fail in code of compliance because the dispersion pipe was not angled correctly. So the 3 holes in the dispersion pipe were facing directly down instead of on a slight angle to let the pipe fill with water and then pour out. The problem with that, of course, is it's a steel pipe, and over years that'll eventually rot out. Face it directly down, high water flow coming down, goes through to the first hole, goes to the second hole as it fills. But no, it's got to be angled. Fail. Get plumber in, plumber comes back, plumber adjusts, get inspection back, second inspection, yes, it passes. So my whole house was going to fall down because of that. The bank was going to cave away and all the houses below me were going to get crushed. We've had them fail on footpaths. We've had them fail on downpipe fittings not being. I've had a house, come to a guy, had a house fail because he did not have a third earthquake strap on his hot water cylinder in a closed cupboard. So you say there's loads of reasons to say houses are non-compliant, but does non-compliant make them unsafe? And the whole reason of evacuating all those people was based on safety. If the downpipe fell off the side of the house, how was that going to do damage? What level of, oh my God, the whole house is now going to fall down? It was ridiculous. And their own report writer told them it was a temporary removal. What got me was I then went and looked at the sites, again, because I've been on the sites a number of times prior to that, going back to the sites to have a look, and you're going, you've evacuated everybody, then you put 3 people back. One of the houses you put them back in is above the retaining wall you say is unsafe. Now either you know the line about the retaining wall not being there makes the property unsafe is not true, or you knowingly and intentionally put people back in the hope that something would drastically go wrong to prove your point. I don't actually care which of the two that is, other than I have empathy for the families involved. Why would council allow you to move back into a house they've just told the entire world is not safe? The reasoning, I believe, is that they've got to stop anyone proving that any of their reports are incorrect. So making certain no one can get on site is so important, because I believe you'll find the mandate of council is to destroy those homes. They've got to get rid of them, because otherwise someone will be able to check and will see that maybe the ground testing wasn't actually as bad as you made out. And we've got other examples of people that have gone and done work and then afterwards got, what was the phrase I used quite a lot. Sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. So people will go and build something and then get a retrospective consent. You're saying, well, are you telling me that these homes are beyond getting retrospective consent? You've done it in plenty of other places. We've got the likes of, I can give you some names of people to go and ask. A lot of the architects, builders, engineers and other people that I've spoken to have specifically asked that their names not get mentioned, the sites that they've given me as examples don't get told where they are, and their client's name don't get mentioned, because they know what will happen to them. And to have my own architect from one of the other builds I did specifically tell me, I can show you this on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, where they ask RFIs for questions we've already answered, and all we do is photocopy the same page they've already got and resend them, but we know it's just to delay the 20 days. So, well, why aren't you doing something about it? Oh, they'll target you. And at one stage I believe that was paranoia, until I saw the poster child of council destruction being Danny Kensian in Bella Vista Homes. They have nailed him under the bus. And there's no reason, had they actually picked up any of those things, that those homeowners needed to be moved out. And they don't want the testing to be done, so you fence that property to make sure no one can get in and prove the point. I mean, all you have to do is read the Rose McLaughlin report and look at some of the comments in it, where they've taken photos of things that are completely irrelevant for the conditioning that they've explained. My favourite one is the downpipe. this downpipe is exposed from corrosion. It shows it wasn't bedded properly. And saying, lady, it was an overland temporary flow path. And you've been in this industry for what, 30 years, I think she says. She might be the one that says, 30 years. And you couldn't tell the difference. But you're an expert. And your report is, deemed to be accurate because Judge Heath said so. Couldn't deviate on the information he'd been given. And then he ring-fenced himself to make sure he couldn't get thrown under the bus by council afterwards, which was, like I said, one of the most fantastic pieces of sidestepping I've seen. I thought he did a brilliant job. He did a fantastic report, and then he made sure he could not get damaged from it. And he wouldn't have said, you should pay this out as soon as you can, if he didn't believe that they had a liability. And yet what they've done is delay it. And now they've said, we're going to go after anyone else we can to get money. So they go after a company that's in liquidation. They go after a section of the Act that actually doesn't get them damages. So this is about punishment. This is about making sure that people can see that this will happen to you. And yet, other properties where this has happened, they're not ring fencing it. They're not putting security fencing around and stopping people getting on site. So that's, in a long diatribe way, that is why I think they've stopped people getting on the property.